Hello, viewers. I'm here with Mrs. Quick, who's an experienced teacher from Greymouth High School. She's going to be speaking to us about the advantages of online learning as opposed to conventional classroom learning, which you're probably familiar with. Mrs. Quick?
Thank you very much, Dr. Hunter. I thought I'd talk this morning about some of the advantages I'm seeing with online learning this week and also when we were in lockdown last time, and perhaps some things not in lockdown. One of the things that people talk so much about to do with schools is about how it's so good for socialization. And I remember that right from when my own children first started school. But actually, a lot of children have some pretty unpleasant socialization experiences at school. And school's not really quite as marvelous as we often hope it is. Great babysitting service. Um, so, if we're talking particularly about the online learning aspect, um, you've got young people, if we're thinking particularly about young people who can sit up in their pajamas, they can focus on what they want to do first, they can get straight into the learning without having to wait for everybody to arrive on time to class, for everybody to, for someone to check that their uniform is correct, to take the roll, to remind Johnny not to, spit at someone else or to put their phone away, or that we can actually put the learning content kind of center stage for people. So it's that particular being able to focus on the learning, I think is one thing that can really help. Would be on the research side of things, it allows us to follow our own interests more. And I think particularly in year 10, one of my colleagues last year, Miss Ruiz in particular, had some students who weren't even coming to school very much in ordinary school time, and they didn't come to the meet necessarily once a week, but they were writing back to her regularly and getting a lot of work done without the kind of terrors for that young person in particular of having to deal with everybody else who was in the classroom. So it's on that basis that I think sometimes we can miss some of the things that can be really useful about online learning.
You mentioned there, you said young people. What age ranges are you discussing? So primary school, high school, university?
I was thinking about high school because that's my area of strongest experience. Really lucky that we didn't have lockdown when my own children were smaller, because I think that can be a lot more difficult, and also puts a lot more pressure on parents to be trying to do it. Once you get to teenagers, I think it's certainly true that lockdown learning or online learning works best for people who are quite self-motivated. They went out to go for a walk this morning, saw the mother of one of the students in 10B, and resisted the urge to call out and say, your child hasn't been doing any work for me yet. But that's okay, because I'm sure that the good students of 10B who live not far from me will make sure that by next week they have done lots of work. I think there's scope with online learning for teachers to make things a lot more flexible for students to respond to their interests, because you don't have to corral everything into everybody. Here we are, we've got 60 minutes, we're in the classroom, we have to find something that everybody is interested in at the same time. So if we were to go into online learning in a more planned and permanent way, I think we'd be able to structure it so, for example, everybody was choosing their own novel instead of here is our class set. But then also there is the fact that some students don't do anything online. And we started the morning thinking about gaming and good gaming and bad gaming. Something we didn't talk about then is the way that so many online tools are designed to keep us linked in there for just a little bit longer and just a little bit longer. And all of us have that experience of thinking we're going to go to bed at 10 o'clock, and then suddenly it's midnight, and we just looked at a few more things.
Excellent, yes.
That
So
can be tricky.
So you mentioned before there are some students for whom sort of getting to school or focusing in class or not being involved in class is an issue. Presumably there are also some students who prefer that system, prefer being in a room with their friends doing stuff together. As an experienced teacher, would you ever feel for sort of the relative size of those two groups, the ones who prefer out of class and online versus who prefer in class?
I think probably 3/4 of people prefer to be in the classroom. That might not be, if we were to take away all the social variables and the kind of general support that many people get from just being around other people who they like. If we could filter all that sort of social support aspect out, because essentially the 25% of students who really hate being at school, often the key reason is because they're not getting that level of social support from the at school experience. If we were to talk about just that kind of, if we could make a pure idea of learning, then I think the shift might be more around, say, 60-40, still in favour of where students are experiencing well at school. But I think everybody's had the experience of, you go to school for a whole day. Actually, adults as well. You go and you get stuck in meetings all day that are all about how we'll be better teachers, and then you don't actually get any time to mark the students' work or be a better teacher. That we have a day off school where we thought we were sick and we're perhaps not as bad as we thought we were, and you came through and you get a whole lot of work done because you haven't got those interruptions. When we came back from lockdown last year, we thought we would trial some ideas where some of our senior students could stay at home and do their work, and we could have a blend of the two. One student I taught, he wrote a letter to Mr. England about how lockdown had worked really well for him, and we were able to arrange that he did his art at home on the day where he would otherwise have a period 5 art class, and he went home at the beginning of lunchtime. And but actually most of our students came back and said, we are so sick of managing ourselves. So I guess I'm kind of shooting myself in the foot with some of my arguments. But if we could, and they just wanted to be at school, and they wanted to have some of that self-management responsibility just taken off them, because lockdown puts it on you almost 100%, and school probably takes 70 or 80% of that self-management away, and kind of tries to build you up from year 9 when your teachers shape almost everything for you through to year 13 and beyond, whereas increasingly you manage a lot of your own homework. So I think if we could set up something that allowed us to have some self-managed online aspects for students earlier, but still have a weekly social environment at school as well, that would be great, instead of being in a kind of, we're either all in lockdown or we're all in school.
Makes sense.
What would it look like if one day in the 10-day timetable students got to work on a project of their own, and if they wanted to do that project at home, they could.
Okay, so is it fair to say that you're saying you think there's advantages to both systems?
Yeah.
There's potentially a way to get the good parts of both, keeping the social interaction whilst having some students benefiting from personal work. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you for speaking to us, Mrs. Quick. I'm sure our viewers have enjoyed it.
It was my pleasure. Oops. No. This is the bit where we find that we need, here we go.